Hey, what's up, you guys? This is Bryan from Keeping Up with the Nerds, and with me are a bunch of performers and voice actors here with me to talk about video games and your guys' work in the industry. Do you guys mind introducing your guys' selves real quick?
Sure. My name is Sarah Elmaleh. I am an actor, mainly a voice actor and a voice director for games. Games are my passion, my favorite. Some games I've been in that I can't tell stories about include Fortnite and Hi-Fi Rush and Helldivers 2 most recently, indie games like Goodbye Volcano High and Gone Home. Yeah, that's me. I also am currently serving as chair of SAG-AFTRA's Interactive Media Agreement Negotiating Committee.
Perfect.
Hello, I'm Seth Allyn Austin. I am an actor and voice actor and movement performer and all the above, and anything that gets me paid and I get to express my artistry through. You can check me out on my IMDb.
What? I'm Andi Norris. I am a stunt and movement performer, as well as an actor for TV, film, and video games. And you may have seen my work in Resident Evil Village, in Star Wars Vader Immortal, several of the Call of Duties, and a bunch of other ones.
My name's Jasiri Booker. I'm a stunt performer, movement performer, and voice actor. I have my biggest claim to fame is that I'm Miles Morales. I do all the stunts for Miles Morales. I'm gonna own that. Yeah, leave that in there. Who am I gonna piss off with that? Probably a lot of people.
So I actually would like to start with this question because you guys did mention right at the start of the podcast, the panel here at LA Comic Con was you guys are essentially coming into work and basically putting on a performance to create and develop this character that millions of people are going to be playing, right? Mm-hmm. But you guys are not told exactly what this character is. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask this question, but we ran out of the time of the panel. Who, if anyone, has the creative control of this character that's being developed? Is it split between the voice actors, the performer, the person who created the character, or is it a collaboration between all of you guys?
Yes.
I mean, really, if you want to pick nits, I think it's probably like the creative director. You know, if they're sitting in on the session and they're like, I really don't like that choice, then it's like, okay, I guess we go back. You know, we go back into the soup and see what comes out. But yeah, I think there's a couple of levels of control. I think we have control over what we perform, but what the director might want is different. Who their boss might want is different. So varying levels of control depending on what avenue you want to look at it from.
I think it's also a situation of the best idea usually wins. Yes. Studios hire the actor, hire the movement professional, hire all these people so that they can bring their expertise. Mm-hmm. You know, if you weren't looking for an individual who could bring either a part of themselves or their experience to every character they bring, then you could bring anyone from off the street, you know, and say, just do a thing, would you? That's kind of what we're looking at with the whole AI thing, is all of a sudden, like, there's a tool that's so powerful that you're giving one person the power to determine how everything looks, which is that is a cool tool, but the collaborative effort, the experience, everything that, like, if how many, math isn't my strong suit. If the five of us were to come up with a character right now, we each have our own different interpretations, and like how this person moves or speaks, we'll all know when it feels right, you know. And yeah, so you come in on the day, whose decision is it? I think it's usually whoever has the best idea.
Got it. Yeah, because I feel like you guys said it best, right? When it comes to like anything that's on like TV or film, the character that you see there, basically the director's the one that will tell you, like, okay, as a stunt performer, you're just going to show up, do the work, because they already have the idea of that character. But when it comes to video games, what video game character can you not think of that doesn't have an iconic idle pose, an iconic voice line, or an action when they throw an axe, or when they swing a sword, or when they're walking through a dark corridor and they have their shoulders like this, you know? There's that distinctive look to it. And so for me personally, as someone that plays video games, it is a collaborative effort. I see, you know, yeah, I could know the voice actor that's behind this voice that I love so much, but the performer, the person moving, that's also the one responsible to help put me in that, like, you know, to fall in love with the character, I guess, in that moment. The second question I have related to that is there a reason why they probably don't tell you guys ahead of time to kind of prepare?
I think a lot of it has to do with just how heavily secretive the video game industry is, because they really only have that launch day to make their money back. Is the thinking. So if anything gets leaked ahead of time, then that drastically impacts their sales.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Because I mean, they can't even give you guys a description of like, well, you know, you're going to be playing a.
And sometimes we do.
teenage-
Sometimes
yeah.
we get something. You know, especially if I'm coming in to play a creature, I often have a general idea, or I might have a Zoom, you know, a couple days ahead of time with the creative director, and they'll walk through what this creature needs to do so that I can be prepared. But that's not across the board standard.
Gotcha. Now I want to go back into that idea of or not the idea, but the job of a creature performer. Is there a difference between that and someone that's doing motion capture or stunt work for a human? Is there a difference in that? Of how you guys approach it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's, you're doing all of the same things you do when you're playing a human creature. You're just adding on the element of it's not human. So that maybe it walks on all fours, you know, maybe it's got a tail or antlers, or, you know, you have to add in another piece of even just the physicality of what's not humanoid, because that's going to change everything about how that character moves.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, any feralness, or, you know, depending on how, like, if you go from feral to highly intellectual, the creature's going to be somewhere on that scale too. You know, and humans are somewhere on that scale too, let's be honest. But but usually the extremes are a bit bigger when you're talking about creatures.
They don't give you guys anything like, for example, a tail. They don't give you something to kind of like see.
It depends.
Okay.
It depends. Sometimes I've been on sets where they've created like a giant foam tail to kind of give you an idea, so you knew where it was in space. I know they have more advanced tails that move.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
articulating ones.
I've never
Yeah.
seen one on a volume. I know that they do use them. I've seen them used in the UK.
Yeah.
But arm extensions I've used,
yeah.
and a lot of people have seen those for like Planet of the Apes that I've used for various characters.
Yeah.
There-
I think
oh, go ahead.
there's also like the cost analysis that you have to use. Like, is it worth developing the tech to track the tail, right? Because that's a lot of work on the engineering side of like, okay, we have rigs for skeletons for humans, and that's already like a whole thing in processing. So figuring out how to rig this tail and make it move and capture that data, is it worth it to do that as opposed to just hand animating it for a character that is not maybe a mainstay in our game? Maybe it's an NPC. The time and cost, like the sunk cost in that, is usually not worth it. So it's like, don't worry about it.
But sometimes you have something that you do track, and then
Yes.
you also have something that's for the performer.
Absolutely.
Right. So even on human characters, right? Like I've played soldiers that are significantly just heavier than me, you know, bigger than me, or they're wearing, you know, lots of armor, and so they'll give me pads to put on my suit so that my arms don't. So that's one less thing I have to think about. Right? Like I can remember that I'm this big and I can
Yeah.
move around like this, but in an 8-hour day, it's just easier if I can't clip.
Yeah.
Easier to interact with something that's physically there than just being told like, hey, you actually have a piece of armor that's
Yeah.
3 feet from your chest. Or
Yeah, and so
whatever.
it's the same way with,
Yeah.
with creatures, right? Like the foam tail, they're not going to track it because it's not going to move like a tail.
Yeah.
But it's going to remind me when I get to hour 6 that, oh yeah, I do have a tail that I have to compensate for when I move.
Yeah. Now, as far as any stunt work for human, you know, you mentioned Miles Morales, right? In that specific video game, they're being thrown a bunch of things, they're getting shot at. So, as someone that does the stunt work for that, do you have tools or assets available so that you can see what you have to dodge, or the scenery that you have to move around in? Because that guy's flying all over New York. You know?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Usually no. Usually it's not like they have a prop that they throw at you or something.
It would be
not
more
like
fun.
Think
It would be a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Grab the water bottle. It's like, okay, I'm gonna chuck it at you and
Dodge.
dodge. Yeah.
I usually for most games it's like, okay, and now you get hit from the right, and it's like, okay, I guess I do this, or and sometimes there is some like reminding of, it's like, what's it like to do this, and I think just having somebody like, hey Seth, can you put your hand on my body and like push really hard, because that's like that's force, and seeing how your body naturally wants to move, and then coming up with a performance that is sort of based on that is helpful. But no, there's no. If anything, it's like sight lines and cues. The director's like, and bang, and now this happens, or explosion behind you, and you kind of have to again, fill in the gaps creatively.
You,
Gotcha.
you need to be good at showing a specific generality. So it's like, as you said, you're being hit from this side. On film, you can see me, and you can see how my hand moves. So you know it's at this angle. You know it's hitting him in the head. You know how hard I swung. Sometimes what he's being hit by hasn't been talked about yet in the animation standpoint. So it's something.
Maybe it's a hit to the head.
This way.
Maybe it's a hit to the body. Maybe, you know, some different games have varying levels of like hit detection. So sometimes it's like your character gets hit and their whole body generally moves. Some games have more defined hitboxes where it's like, and it hits your arm, or it specifically hits your head, or specifically hits your leg. So it really kind of depends on those parameters as well.
Please tell me that they at least tell you, like, okay, if you're going to get hit in the head, it's going to be, like, in the temple area. Or, no, really?
As the technology in games gets better and better, like, you know, we all love what we do, and even from, like, the engineering side of it, each game's coming up with new tools. And so the technology is becoming more specific to go, not your temple. And, like, when that happens, they need whole new animations. It gives us a lot more to work with, but like for cost reasons and just the limitations of the software, general. General.
Uppercut to the jaw. Where in the jaw? It doesn't matter. Just generalize it in this area.
Up and back, but don't grab your face because maybe it hit your chest.
I was laughing because in the panel you guys were, or was it you that told the story of how they said don't breathe, but move your chest. And I'm like, how is it directed?
I hope people in the audience were trying it as I was
I'm
doing it.
picturing it in my head because usually, like, we direct skits and everything, and I usually tell people, the people that I work with, you know, try to give them general directions, but also try not to kill them with certain things and certain movements, because I get it, it's tough. You don't. How are you supposed to breathe and move without making a sound? It makes no sense.
It's so funny. I was thinking, just when you're talking about hits to the head, I was like, oh, is that? Because when we voice them as a voice actor, I'm like, you wouldn't make a sound, so we have to make up a sound for something. It's too fast. So they're like, voice that. You're like, okay, and you just wing it. And it sounds like there are equivalent impossibilities. That you guys are asking
My
for all the
favorite for VO is like, throw a grenade, soft, medium, heavy.
What sound is it?
Throw a ball really hard. Yeah, get over there. Like, like what do you do?
So your description to throw a grenade is soft, medium, heavy.
Sure.
Soft as in like lightly throw?
Like
You're throwing the grenade there.
Right in front of you.
Because you know, I make a sound when I do this. You know, like
And the voice is the same thing. The specific generality where they're like hits. You know, light, medium, heavy.
So
And you're like, okay.
I was actually going to ask you a question about voice acting because we've spoken to a couple voice actors before, and everyone seems to have a different approach when they're given an assignment, right? And one of the most common things I've heard is that, again, it's a very general description of a character. Teenage, modest, or shy, and it's like very generalized word description. So why do you think that they give you these very minimal descriptors when the creatives have an idea of what their character is going to be like already? And what do you do to kind of like add your own flair to that character?
Sure. I mean, I think part of it is the secrecy that you mentioned. Part of it is, you know, sometimes it's preparation, to be honest, as a voice director. I mean, just how much scripts are coming in down to the wire. I mean, sometimes it's not that we didn't get it because they didn't want to share it. It's like they're writing it up until the session moment. There can be a surprising lack of planning for sessions, and I'm sure that's true for movement too. And some of it might just be that they are excited to see what you fill in the blanks, and they just embrace the collaborative process, which is you know, ideal. So for me, as a director especially, but also as an actor, like, you know, you start with these parameters, you start with the generalities, and you start to place them and you know, be as specific as you can. For me, what's really joyful and special about this work is like the moment where a strange instinct takes over. I'm speaking as a director now. When I see an actor find a strange detail that's like adds a whole other dimension to the character, like they're playing a villain, but they have a moment of like awkwardly scratching their neck or something, or like making a noise that's like different or something, adds like a whole other layer. When you start to place those, the specificities that don't contradict what you've already set up, but really expand it, then your character starts to feel real, and you can see your actors start to own the character and feel like it's really particular to them. And when they have that ownership, suddenly their energy for play and their creative freedom and their lack of inhibition, it just opens up worlds of possibilities, and the rest of the character comes from that. And I'm assuming it's probably true for movement too.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of, especially I'm gonna reference a TV show real quick, but like I've seen some TV shows where it's run for 3 or 4 seasons, and you can tell there's like development as the seasons go on because they start to own that character or add some sort of flair, right, to it. And so it's interesting because I can't picture going into a session. And again, I'm not a voice actor or anything, but I can't picture going into a session just going like, here are the 3 details to the character. Now, action.
As a director, so often I have to advocate for that playtime and for and risks. I mean, I think one of you was talking about, like, I think it was in Java, it was like, oh, that didn't work. Oh, okay.
That was really bad.
Oh, okay.
I just wasted probably $1,000 on that. That was awful.
Yeah. And as a director, I have to, I reassure teams who are nervous, they're spending money on the session, they've got this character in their head, maybe they know how to communicate it, maybe they don't, maybe they're relying on me to communicate that, and to just be like, hey, it's cool, this is what these first 20 minutes are for. It's to try stuff, to fail, to feel comfortable failing. My job is to set that space so that actors know that they're safe to try things and for things to not be perfect every time. There is no perfect. And so safeguarding that collaborative process, especially in that early character finding phase, is so important, and a lot of that is trust and belief in the collaborative process.
Now, as performers, do you guys have the opportunity to take multiple takes for a character? So for example, in voice acting, I didn't like the tone into which this situation, how I approached the situation. As a stunt performer, I didn't like the way I took this take as an explosion. Let me do a different angle or something like that. Are you guys given that choice?
You can always say that.
Yeah.
It depends on how many shots they have in the day.
Yeah, sometimes they're like, oh, that looked great to me. It's like, okay. I guess we're moving on. You liked it. I think that's what's interesting about motion capture, though, is that because an animator can tweak it, if they want my arm to go somewhere else, they can move my arm. And it's like they still have the rest of my body, and my arm will do something different, or so it's a little different than TV theatrical, where it's like you either take all of it. It's harder to replace aspects of TV theatrical.
Right.
Of course. I did mention before we started recording, I wanted to talk about the strike, because you guys did mention it on the show as well, and I feel like a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to know about it. I mean, it's SAG-AFTRA, correct? So we've heard about them on the news because of the writer's strike and everything that's been going on, but the video game industry has always been one to kind of be left in the dust. It's the last to be talked about. And a lot of us gamers always wonder why. Why is it that it's always the last thing that people want to talk about, when it's one of the biggest and most growing industries in
Sorry, I'm not laughing because it's not funny, but it's true.
It is,
it is a comical difference, yes.
Yeah, you have film and TV that's growing, and then video games, which is growing at a much higher exponentially rate. It's profitable. So why is it always the last one to be talked about?
I think I feel that as someone who grew up playing games too, I've always been like, why don't we talk about these things in the same sentence? Why don't we talk about film and books and all of these things together? They're all these art forms. We consume them. We, as players, obviously tend to like lots of all these different kinds of things. Technically speaking, we did start negotiating this contract well before TV theatrical. So just as a timeline thing, we started negotiating this contract in 2022. I started looking into AI as an issue many months before that, and so we were negotiating before they started negotiating, while they were on strike. Once they finished striking, we've been negotiating this whole time. So that's kind of I would redirect that answer back to the question of why are these game companies not seeing themselves as part of the same industry, as part of the same, there's been a historic resistance to saying, oh yeah, we're part of the entertainment industry. No, they're like, no, we're tech. I'm like, well, but you're coming to hire entertainers, and there's this big thing of, games being fun. That's entertaining. You're entertaining people. I think you might be entertaining people.
The other aspect that you can see is that they both have credits at the end of both things. You look at film credits, you're in that theater for an extra 10 minutes looking at everyone that's there. And in video games, you do the same thing. It's at the end of every game, be it a story-based game or whatever it is, you have 5 minutes of just running credits of multiple people that worked on this game. So you could see that there is a similar thing here, right? So as far as the strike goes,
credits. The movement performers.
Right.
which again, you should have, especially now with so much technology that's out there. You guys are doing so much more work than you guys were doing a couple years ago. You guys are trying to capture and sell those moments, especially with action games being really popular. You know, it does take a lot, I can imagine. But now I forgot the question I was going to ask, because I said the parallels to film and video games. Can you guys describe what the purpose of the strike is? I don't know if you guys have answered it, because you mentioned it. It's been 2 years now. Right? So why is it taking so long? What's the purpose of it? What goal are you guys trying to reach with this strike?
Well, you know, like any negotiation, we both brought different proposals to the table. We managed to resolve most, by far, like I think 22 out of 25 at the point we called a strike authorization, which would have been last year now. And at that point, we still had to resolve wages. I mean, folks are aware of how nutty inflation's been, and so wages that rise to kind of help, you know, cover up or compensate for that. Safety provisions for our movement performers, things that people might assume they already have, which they did not. Things like set medics on set for hazardous days of work. I mean, these folks are literally throwing their face at the ground, right? And so the idea that you wouldn't require a set medic to be there in case someone really hurts themselves before, you know, getting to a hospital. Things like that. 5-minute rest breaks in their 8-hour day per hour, 5 minutes per hour. That's something that voice actors have had that movement performers didn't have in their contract before.
Hang on, can I intro for a second? You said there's no set medics in these areas that you guys are performing.
They're not required.
They're not required.
So some studios do bring them in anyway, but they are not contractually required, which means that a lot of them don't. And so you could have days with full stunts that don't have a coordinator, that don't have a set medic.
And 5-minute breaks every hour per hour for your guys' full shifts.
A lot of these things, like, it's expected that the performer know how to advocate for themselves. And so a lot of us have been doing this for a long time. And we know our tool, we know our instrument, and we're comfortable enough in our career where we can say, hey, I'm tired, I'm gonna take a break. But someone who is their first day and doesn't know how to speak up for themselves, that's not written in there. So they don't know how to ask for it. And so a lot of these things that we're gifted with, because we've spent the time in there developing these relationships and the fortitude in our talent, we're like, we can ask these things to someone who's nervous that they're going to blow their first day of work. That person deserves the same agency to ask for a break that we do.
So it took a strike authorization to get them to agree to that, which I think I mean, these are very humane and reasonable needs, I think. We have now, you know, come to a tentative agreement on the wages piece and the safety piece, thank goodness. But still outstanding is the use of AI, generative AI specifically, in order to make more performance, you know, based on our work, or in a way that we would normally be hired to do. And so, you know, I think transparency around what the use that you want to use it for, getting our permission, making sure that it's required to get our consent for that, and then paying us fairly on top of that has been, you know, the theme throughout all the contract negotiations that have happened at SAG-AFTRA so far. It's kind of the institutional position. It's very reasonable. It's not preventing the use of this tool. It's saying, hey, we just want to keep collaborating. This tool is part of what you're going to use. It's deeply connected. It's intimately from my work. I need to be part of that collaboration process and part of that collaboration conversation. And so that, you know, hashing out the details of that, who's covered, what does it mean to replicate somebody, you know, all of these things we've worded very carefully in order to make sure that it accurately, you know, reflects the kind of agency that we have right now when we're talking about advocating for yourself. You know, you can set a boundary on set the way we do our work now and say, I'm not going to give that to you because that's going to injure me. I don't feel comfortable with that because of my background, maybe my sexual orientation or my identity. I can withhold my work and kind of make that collaboration a bit of a negotiation, right? And that's just built into how we work right now, and true for movement just as it is for voice. So all we're saying is we need to have that conversation even when I'm not there. If you're going to be able to do it without me there, I need to make sure it's in my contract so that you still come back and talk to me and I have the same degree of control when we talk about control, right?
Yes.
Collaboration and control. I deserve to have control of that piece if it's something that could be really violating to me. And so hashing out those details has been the sticking point.
But without this contract in place right now, essentially anyone, because you guys mentioned it right now, any newcomers, anyone that's new to the industry, they're not going to say anything,
right?
Especially if they're trying to get their foot in the door.
Some veterans have a hard time speaking up for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Because if someone, because we spoke with a couple voice actors last year here at the convention, and their big issue was they talked a lot about AI, the usage of AI. But again, you don't think about the other elements, especially when it comes to performance. The physical movement part of it, like, I didn't know that set medics weren't required on here. This is new to me. And thank you guys for informing me about that, because like, yeah, it's crazy. How can you guys not? Now thinking about it, someone who is barely starting out in the industry, has no money to their name, they're not going to say no. And that to me is a big shock, because the industry is going to look at it and be like, well, you know, we can always just find the next person that's out there on that door. And they're most likely going to do it because they want that fame, they want that notice, they want to build their resume. So it's great that you guys are advocating for this and continuing the strike and informing us about this, because I feel like a lot of people do need to know, you know, without you guys, what is a video game? It's just going to be a person like this, no movement, it's just static, with no story, no substance, no nothing. So thank you guys for that. Before we wrap up, let's end on a positive note. You guys were talking about your influences in the panel. You guys mentioned, you did especially, Seth, ninjas, Power Rangers, TMNT, all things that nerds love.
Oh yeah.
So what got you into this industry? If you guys can kind of go into more detail about that, what inspired you guys to get in there? And if there's anyone watching that is interested in wanting to be a part of this industry, you guys have any advice for them?
I guess. Okay.
Sarah, if you want to break, so.
So earliest inspirations in games, I've been playing games my whole life, and I feel like the two early performances that really lit my brain on fire were Mark Hamill as Adrian Ripburger in Full Throttle, because I'd grown up a Star Wars fan from earlier than that, and so the idea that like dweeby Luke Skywalker was now suddenly this rich, plummy Tim Curry-esque villain was like mind-blowing to me. Like it was the first like awakening to what voiceover might be, that you could just the range and the difference, and so delicious. Like what a performance. And Dominic Armato as Guybrush Threepwood, just like such an incredible. He like really set this everyman kind of template, like this very normal guy, but he was also like erudite and goofy. It's just like a really, really beautifully calibrated performance, kind of like John Krasinski from The Office, but in video games and well before that kind of energy. And that was always really inspiring to me, very natural. And then in high school, Jennifer Hale in Knights of the Old Republic, I think was the first time I was like, what would a day of work be like for games? Going into a booth, using my imagination, and then spending hours in conversation, like intimate conversation with a player and connecting them with them over time and having their choices impact my development. Like that was really like also lit my brain on fire as far as like this is a career I might want to pursue. Then after that, and this is my last one. I would say Uncharted, watching the process of the behind the scenes process for Uncharted, the Uncharted series, and how collaborative, we keep going back to collaboration, like how collaborative that was, how based in actors' chemistry and contribution that was, all these, you know, like the chemistry between those characters in that game, that process felt perfect to me. That was like, I don't want to, you know, I wasn't always comfortable being judged by how I look, and I was like, this is just theater, but with players spending hours of their time with me. Like that's perfection, and also in concert with other people. So those are some of my earliest inspirations. But advice, I would say, I mean, you're hearing it over and over again, like feed your imagination. Your imagination is by far the strongest, most important tool that you're going to have. You know, on-camera actors have the benefit of all kinds of other stimuli to like kind of, you know, trigger their imagination, whether it's a set or explosions or scene partners or whatever it is. Like so much feeds your imagination and makes it easy to do your job in some ways. It's still very technical in different ways. But for games, it's the opposite. We use the power of our imagination to make real and specific and give immersiveness and give persuasion to the rest of the circumstances around us. That's our gift, is we make everything else seem more real. And to do that, you'd have to have a hyper-powered imagination. So feed your imagination, and as much as you can, try to give yourself permission to become as uninhibited as possible, because you're going to try a lot of things, and you're going to look and sound really dumb. And you have to be very comfortable with looking and sounding dumb, and then just trying something else and not shaming yourself too hard for that. So I would say those two things. If you can have a strong imagination and you're comfortable looking silly or sounding silly, you're in a good starting spot.
Perfect. Now, Seth, before I let you answer the question real quick, I'm going to do a quick battery change on that camera because it is dying. And I don't want
my
it to die
answer
off.
was a whole way too long.
What happened? We're back here. Seth, what? Same question.
I think because I started martial arts at a really young age, my parents were both academics. My sister's an academic. They all had their doctorates, and I dropped out of college. But I had a very supportive mother, who, when I, you know, sweating and everything like that, when I was like, I think I'm going to drop out of college and go on a tour with a musician, she said, okay. And I went, you know, expecting for like the hand to come across my face. She's like, you have talent, you know, go. And I was like, ooh. So I was very blessed to have a good support system for my parents to go ahead and do that. But because I was in martial arts the whole time, things in the gaming industry that really, really inspired me were games like Mortal Kombat 2 and Street Fighter. And I think what's really cool with that, because if you look at the hand-in-hand growth between fiction and reality, they boost each other. I think a really good example is Star Trek, right? Like a lot of the technology in Star Trek is stuff we have today and even better, which is it was just someone going like, hey, you know, it'd be cool, holograms, it'd be sweet. So like, but as far as like the physical aspect, there was tons of movements in those games that then silly kids like me saw, and I went, ooh, can I do that? And I would do it, and then the next game would come out, and instead of doing like 3 kicks, or instead of doing 1 kick, the character would do 3 kicks. Stuff that we thought was impossible, but through animation, they were able to do. And then we went, nah, I bet you I could do it. I bet you I could do it.
Literally.
And then all of a sudden, we'd be able to do it. You know, talk about nerdom. You look at a Dragon Ball Z, I think is a really great example. Each generation will pick stuff up quicker and then surpass you way faster, you know? Like, I was so angry when Goten and Trunks came out and they were just Super Saiyans right off the bat. And I went, Goku worked so hard. Why are you undermining Goku's accomplishments?
The laws of physics went to a hyperbolic time chamber, trained, and nothing mattered.
Nothing, and they were just like, and they went, hey, you know, it'd be cool.
We're 10. Yeah.
You know, and they did it, right?
Yeah.
But like that happens with art. Art imitates life. Life imitates art, and they grow together. So as Sarah was saying, you know, advice is follow what you don't think is possible. If something, you know, just speaking from a movement perspective, if you're inspired by something, try it, because it could be possible. There's gymnastics moves which back in the day, the physics of it were put into a computer and they went impossible. The computer says you can't do that. And then some Russian guy would do it. And they went, well, I guess the computer was wrong.
Those physics models.
Yeah. Right. Like, we as people, through inspiration, keep growing. So always be inspired. And as you said, always, you know, don't be afraid of looking dumb. Keep going, because it's going to be silly until you land it. Once you land it, now it's going to be named after you.
Yeah.
You know?
I just like to go back. My dad was a huge Star Trek fan, so I grew up as a Trekkie. He always told me, like, oh yeah, those communicators are going to be real. We have cell phones. Self-working elevators, we have that too. And then with Dragon Ball, I always find myself doing this, trying to instant transmission. Come on! One of these days it's going to work.
Damn you, 405. Come on!
I'm late for work. Andi, what about you?
Well, I feel, I mean, a little out of place there. I didn't grow up playing video games, and I didn't watch a lot of TV. My parents were very much like, no, you read. I grew up an avid reader, and we went and saw theater all the time. So I had a very it was much more about, my childhood was a lot about free play, which I'm hearing is not a thing that they let kids do anymore, which drives me,
You don't just go in the yard?
Yeah, no,
just go in the yard.
Go.
Really? Yeah, no, it's a whole thing.
You're bored, go outside.
But my point in that being that my whole childhood was imagination, and it was always I would read these books and then I would write plays about them in recess, and I would like cast my friends in them, and then I would insist that my teacher let us perform it in front of the class. Like, I didn't have a lot of friends.
One-woman shows.
Yeah, there were like a lot of one-woman shows. It was definitely that kid. But I also did a lot of movement, and I got into, like in high school, I was introduced to experimental theater and, you know, devised theater, and then I studied that in college. And then I moved to LA and was like, well, I guess I'm an on-camera actor now, and so I'll just throw all of that out until I discovered video games and that someone was going to pay me to do all the weird shit that I was already doing anyway. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Cool. All right.
And now I play a lot of video games.
Yeah,
But
there you go.
Research, we call it.
Yeah, research.
Yeah.
My inspiration was I was really big in Power Rangers growing up as a kid, and then later found Spider-Man. I'm really a big influence for me was the faceless hero, right? People who are fully masked, because their secret identity was different than who the hero was. The hero could be anybody under the mask, and for me, that was very inspirational. I didn't really know why until later, and it's like identity stuff and being mixed and not necessarily knowing how to process that as a kid, but the idea that anybody can be a superhero and it's their actions that define them was something that was very inspirational to me. For video games, I loved video games, playing them. It was something that I always did to connect with people. It was never about like the competition or the achievement. It was always like a social thing. But then when I had time to play them for myself, it was something that would inspire me. And again, like watching how they moved and kind of influencing like it kind of thinking of, well, who did this? It could be anybody, right? I'm looking at this character, but anybody can produce this movement if they try hard enough. So that was my inspiration for that. As far as my tips for anybody who wants to get into it, you have to be lucky. And I think there is a recipe for creating your own luck, and that is when preparation meets opportunity. So work hard, and when the moment strikes, like grab it and don't let it go. I think that's my story. That's how it happened for me, and just being prepared, and when the moment came, knowing that my hard work had paid off. I think the other thing is don't be afraid to be by yourself. I think that's something that a lot of people, like younger generations, struggle with, is feeling like the feeling of being alone is something that's oppressive or something that stifles them, and they're scared of their own thoughts and things like that. But being able to let your imagination run wild and talking things out with yourself and defining your thoughts, I think, is very important, because then you can pour that out. If you don't really have strong thoughts on something, then how are you going to collaborate with other people? And so I think being alone, being a little weird, talking to yourself, I think I walked home a lot. So I'd be like by myself walking home, and I had a lot of time to be with myself and think of things and fantasize about things and find what I was passionate about. And I think time alone outside of social media, time alone outside of just consuming and digesting is really important if you do want to be creative. I think it's important to get inspiration from things, but understanding why something inspires you is just as important as being inspired.
Perfect. I'll be honest with you, that's the second time I've heard that quote, luck is preparation meets opportunity. So that is a true statement.
It's true.
It's true. It's 100% true. Before we wrap it up, is there anything you guys want to plug in? Any handles, any things for the strike or anything like that that our audiences should know?
I'm on Twitter and Twitter. It's Twitter.
No, it's Twitter.
It's Twitter. Still, and Instagram as Seth Allyn, so SELMALEH. It is mostly now strike stuff. At one time it was travel photos. Now it is pure strike, straight to the dome.
What is your brand?
So you can follow me there. Follow at SAG-AFTRA, certainly, for all kinds of official news hot off the presses. Thanks to everyone who follows and pays attention to different, to milestones. I mean, it's exciting every time we hit new milestones for games that have signed our the contract, the version of the contract that has what we want in it. For example, Last Sentinel, an amazing, so excited that company signed for that game and all of their games. But yeah, over 100 titles have now signed exactly the protections that we need, which is great. So that kind of news is great. Pickets, people can come to Pickets if they're LA based.
Anybody can.
Everybody.
Yeah, that's right. This coming Thursday, the 10th, is it right? At EA. That's going to be a big one. EA has, come out with a very
aggressive,
bold, very invested, very deeply invested in AI as the future, as their vision of the future for this industry and for this medium. And so showing up to our picket says, hey, human beings have to be a part of that equation, and so does fairness. So all of those. There's an Action Network petition that you can find as well, and that sort of, as watching that number go up is nice. Anywhere you see discourse online, if people ask what we're doing, why we're striking, folks who don't know that we're on strike or what we're striking about, say, hey, it's about fairness in the use of AI moving forward. It's about keeping our characters human in games. And so advocating for that, or countering different narratives that come out of companies that are like, nah, it's not necessary. And you're like, no, it is.
And www.sagaftra.org/video game strike.
Yes, that's the official Yeah, the official URL SAG-AFTRA.org/videogamestrike. So, yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Anyone else want to plug anything?
Plugging ourselves. State, if you know, I think the name of our panel was like the people behind the masks, right? And finding some sort of recognition is good. So that being said, hey, on Instagram at Seth Allyn Austin, SETHALLYNAUSTIN. You can also check out Shots with Jeth. That is at SHOTSWITHJETH. Let me try that again. JETH.
That was like a
We'll keep mine short. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, although I don't really post it. Mostly just Instagram as Andi_Norris.
Are you streaming currently or no?
I'm not currently. I'm hoping to get back into it. It's, as schedules
Schedules are tough.
and what I can stream opens up again.
That's very true.
True. Yeah, I don't really have much to plug. Andy and I are working on a motion capture
Oh, are we talking about
workshop.
that? Okay. Let's talk
I'll
about
put it
that.
out into the world. It's something that we want to do. With the strike, things have slowed down, but we really want to create a place where people can learn this stuff and make it accessible and show people that they can do it. I think a lot of schools want to hold the secrets and be like, if you want to get in, you got to come through us. And that's not what we believe. We believe that the creator is inside of you, and figuring out the pitfalls and how to navigate them is something that should be accessible to everybody, and kind of giving people the confidence to go out there and perform and get better. So if that's something that interests you, you can go to her page. You can look me up. I'm at Jasiriously, JASIRIOUSLY on Instagram. I don't post much, but I'll engage you if you're there, and if there are updates, that's where you'll be able to find it. But that's
Come
something in
find
the
your
works.
inner monster with me.
Yeah.
Yes, if you're LA based, it's a beginner class, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
No experience needed. So.
Perfect. Well, that brings us to the end of this interview. Thank you guys so much again for
Thank
providing
you.
all the information, for taking the
Thank
time
you.
to interview with us. Everything that was explained, plugs, will be in the description down below. But with that said, my name is Bryan, and with me are, I don't want to mess up any names, but
Sarah Elmaleh.
Seth Allyn Austin.
Andi Norris.
Jasiri Booker.
and this is Bryan from Keeping Up with the Nerds. We'll see you guys in the next video covering more of LA Comic Con.